Hello and welcome back to the Xamarin Forms tutorial where we work on a time tracker app. I'm Patrick and this is the Let's Create series. Okay, so I'm going to run through this again. So last time we had an issue that the test data, some of the properties, well, one of the specific properties weren't being mapped correctly. So we had it here as some time, but when we head over to the Firebase console, we notice that it's some date. And so if we just change that in the test data model, we should see that that kind of fixes our issue. So if we just change this to some date, that should work. And so now if we run the app, okay, with the app started, we can log in. I'll just use sign in with email. And with a successful login, our items should map and we can use our breakpoint that we had just to take a look at item. And we can see that age, which is an integer, mapped properly, as did amount, which is a double, flag, which is a Boolean, the ID is coming through, name is there, and some date is now mapping properly. It's not that default Jan 1 date, it's October 30th, which is when I set up the new test data, and so now we can see it's mapping properly. That's great. So we can press continue. And so now that we have that there and everything seems to be working, we have successful data mapping from Firebase Cloud Firestore to our Xamarin project. So with that, we can stop the app. And now we'll make it so when the user clocks in, shouldn't have stopped the app. So when the user clocks in and they click clock in, the counter should start ticking. And then when they clock out, we need to save it. And so we do have this method where we're logging work item, but we haven't implemented this method yet, so we need to make an actual work service. So just to test, if we click clock in, it looks like that's not, oh, I see, okay, we got a breakpoint. I'm gonna remove that breakpoint since that issue is fixed, and then I'll clock in and clock out. Did seem to work here. We should have gotten a break, but so if we clock in, our timer is ticking, that's great. And then if we clock out, it should give us, the 6 or 7 seconds, or 8 at that time, and so that's perfect. So that is working still. So we can press stop, and now we need to make our work service. So it was using probably a mock work service. Let's go ahead and check Page Model Locator. So with Page Model Locator open, we can scroll down to our service registrations, and we'll see that iWork service is using our mock work service. And what we want to do is kind of use one of these repositories for Cloud Firestore. So instead of iRepository test data, we can do iRepository with a work item. So the work item, let's go into here. Work item is a model that we already have. So let's head over to Page Model Locator. And in here, we'll just make a registration. So container.register. This will be this will take in dependency service. So dependency service, and it'll be .get, and we'll use iRepository. And this time it'll be a work item. Because I think work item doesn't implement iIdentifiable. It doesn't. Perfect. Okay, so this just needs to implement iIdentifiable. And then we'll get an error that we need to implement the interface, so we can just use a quick fix, implement interface, and that'll give us that ID. And instead of throwing, we'll just do a get set here as well. And we can save that, and that should fix that error, and it does. So we can see that our error is fixed. We no longer need this mock work service, and once we remove it, we're going to have, if we ran the app right now, we would have quite a few issues, specifically because we don't actually have an implementation for an iRepository for a work item. So let's make that. Over in the iOS project, let's go into services, and we have our account service, our base repository, and our test data repository. We need to make a work item repository. So add new file or new class. I'll use new class, and I'm going to call this work item repository. Okay, now that we have our work item repository, we can just extend from base repository, and we need to provide a type, and this will be of type work item. So we can use a quick fix here, and that will allow us to import the using. And then we need to implement the abstract class, which requires a document path. Now in Firestore, this document path doesn't necessarily exist yet, but it's going to look pretty similar to test data repository's document path. It will be in users, and then we need the user's ID, but instead of test, it will be, we can call it work items. So let's make that path now. We don't need to go into Firebase to make it actually, because when we save, if the document doesn't exist, it'll create And that's what we want for users, because we don't really know what users are using the app. So when they create a new work item, then we want them to be able to create the document. So we shouldn't need to do that. But we do need to provide this document path. So we can copy it right from the test data repository. And we'll head back to the work item repository. And we'll just paste that here. And then we'll just replace test with work. Work is fine. And so that gives us that document path. Now, because we did all of the work with a typed parameter in the base repository, we don't need to do anything else here yet. So then back in our time clock page, we can head up to the constructor and we can bring in, so we don't really need iWorkService anymore. Maybe we do. So the service should interface through the repository to talk to Cloud Firestore. So let's also work on the iWorkService. I think we can keep that in the shared project. So we're going to do that for now. It's not going to be a mock service. We'll just do add new class under services, work, add new class. And this is going to be a work service. And so work service will implement the iWorkService interface, and then we'll need to use a quick fix to implement the interface. And work service is going to want that repository. So in the constructor of work service, we can bring in iRepository, and this will be work item. And we can just call this repository. And then in the constructor, let's save a local copy. So underscore repo is fine, equals repository. And then we can use a quick fix to create that private member. And now we need to kind of fill these out in accordance with how we interface through the repository. So log work async, we only have get for now, and it gets just a specific document ID. So we need to kind of keep going on base repository as well. So let me just open base repository just to make sure it looks okay. So we have the get, which just returns a single item. Then we have GetAll, which returns a list of all of those items. And so I do think that before we keep going on work service, we need to finish up the repositories. I'm going to close these files. I'm going to close work service. I'm going to close work item repository. And I'm going to head over to the base repository. So we're already here. And so instead of get, which is already working, we need a GetAll. And so this needs to take a collection ID, not just a document ID. So where get takes in a string ID, GetAll needs to take in a collection ID. And so back in Firestore, we'll see that you can add a document. So I'm going to go all the way back to users. Users itself is a collection of documents. And in here, there are two documents. And when I open one of the documents, we'll see that I have a collection as well as some document properties. And then, so this is a sub-collection of this specific user document. And when I open it, it too can have multiple documents. So what we need to do from here is back in our base repository, GetAll needs so instead of string ID, we'll do string collection, or collection name, I think we'll do. Whoops, capital. And so this will do something very similar to what get did. And so we want a task completion source. So in the GetAll, we'll remove that throw, and we'll say var tcs equals new task completion source. And now instead of a t, we want the kind of the return type to match the return type of the method. So it'll be an iList with type t. So iList type t. And so that's all this will be. And then, just like always, we'll return tcs.task. So we can go through Firebase. So we'll say Firebase.Cloud Firestore. We can use Firestore, and then we'll get its shared instance. So in here, we want to get the collection of the document path itself. And so now that we have the collection, we want to get documents. And so this will take in a snapshot, I'm sure. We'll see if it throws an error, and an error. We'll use a simple lambda. And so this is a query snapshot, which I believe is the same as up here. Nope, document snapshot. Okay, we'll see how that changes. And then we have error, which is an NS error, just like the other one. So in here, just like always, we want to check for error. So if error does not equal null, then something went wrong, and we can just keep that kind of comment there. So something went wrong. And in here, we'll just TCS try set result And this will just kind of be like a default, which for a list will be an empty list. And then we'll just return. Otherwise, we don't have an error, and so we can try to convert this list. So if we say var docs equals snapshot.documents, that must make the actual read. And so then from here we can say for each var doc in docs, our current item is going to be equal to doc.convert. Let's see if this works. And so this will just be a T. And so that'll do the conversion for us. Then we need to store it in a list. So we need to make a list up top. And so right below that TCS, so we're going to say var list equals new, and you can't make an iList, so we'll just say list of T. And then every time we convert this, let's add it to the list. So we'll just say list.add, and we'll say item. And so once we're done with all of this conversion, we're going to return that. So we're going to say tcs.trySetResult, and this will just be list. And that should suffice. And so for either case, we're returning some way, right? We're either setting the result as default or we're setting the result as list. And so that's perfect. So that should work as a GetAll, and we're gonna test to make sure. So let's go ahead and test. All right, so we changed the signature for the method. So let's go to the declaration for the iRepository. And now GetAll can't be empty. You know what, I guess it can, right? Yeah, it's gonna be. For now, let's make it empty. So we're gonna move collection name. Oh, we didn't even use it, so that's perfect. Exactly, I was gonna say, we're gonna move collection name down and we'll set it to the document path, but that's already what we're doing, so that's perfect. Let's just get rid of that. So GetAll can be an empty method, I mean like no parameters. And then in here, it'll get the collection from document path, it'll get documents, it'll run through the query document snapshot, and it'll just convert all our items and return, hopefully. That's on a good day. So let's see what happens. So I'm going to head over to the time clock page model. And we already kind of have some, test code in here to see if everything's working. So instead of get and a specific document, let's get all. And so this, just to remove confusion, I'm going to change this from item to items, right? And then I'm going to put a breakpoint here as well, and I'm going to run the app. We should hit this breakpoint. Oh, yep. All right, fair enough. So we have a page model locator resolution exception. And so that happens because while we tried to use dependency service to get this, oh, no, that's not even about the repository. I'm just thinking back. I should have waited on that error. But anyway, I removed the service. So like iWork service. I'll just Control Z through this because there we go. So I removed that. So you can also probably Control Z. I removed the work service kind of replaced it with the work item repository. The only thing there is, they're not the same. The service doesn't replace the repository, it uses the repository. But let's definitely comment out this registration for the iRepository on the work item. I'm going to press run. And so we'll log in using email, just kind of with our test user. So test123 is my user. Whoops. We'll come in here and this should hit our breakpoint. Items is not null. That's outstanding. But we do want to make sure that all the properties are still being mapped, and they are. So we still have age, amount, flag, all that stuff. So that's great. So our GetAll method works. I think that's a good stopping point for today's video. If you like the video, feel free to give it a like and subscribe to the channel. If you have any questions, leave them down below in the comments section. Thank you for watching the Xamarin Forms tutorial. I'm Patrick, and this is the Let's Create series.